really do practice from a Soto point of view. And if you had a chance to look at the materials for the class, one of the starting points is the first document that's in the section on Zazen, which is the second one. So I'm actually going a little bit out of order. But the Fukan Zazengi, which was one of the first things that Dogen Zenji, who is the Soto founder in Japan, wrote. He sort of talks about it, well, first of all, Fukan Zazengi is the universal promotion of the principles of Zazen. So it's kind of his argument piece that everybody should practice Zazen. So he sort of begins by explaining how, even though in terms of the Zen belief, we're all inherently enlightened, that there is still a need for practice and for the practice of sitting. And he sort of talks about this in a very metaphorical way. But the part I wanted to read actually starts on page 28, and it says, "You should therefore cease from practice based on intellectual understanding, pursuing words and following after speech, and learn the backward step that turns your light inward and illuminates yourself. Body and mind of themselves will drop away, and your original face will be manifest. If you want to attain suchness, you should practice suchness without delay." So basically, sit down and your body and mind will drop away of themselves, is what he's saying. And then he gives Zazen instruction. I just thought this would be a good point to begin. So this is our Soto founder's Zazen instruction. For Sanzen, or seated meditation, a quiet room is suitable. Eat and drink moderately. Cast aside all involvements and cease all affairs. Do not think good or bad. Do not administer pros and cons. Cease all the movements of the conscious mind, the gauging of all thoughts and views. Have no designs on becoming a Buddha. Sanzen has nothing whatever to do with sitting or lying down. And I'll come back to that point a little bit later. At the side of your regular sitting, spread out thick matting and place a cushion above it, which that's what Sabuton and Zafu are. Sit either in the full lotus or half lotus position. In the full lotus position, you first place your right foot on your left thigh and your left foot on your right thigh. In the half lotus, you simply press your left foot against your right thigh. You should have your robes and belt loosely bound and arranged in order. Basically, don't wear really tight clothing when you're trying to sit. Then place your right hand on your left leg and your left palm facing upward in your right palm, thumb tips touching. Thus sit upright in correct bodily posture, neither inclining to the left nor to the right, neither leaning forward nor backwards. Be sure your ears are on a plane with your shoulders and your nose in line with your navel. Place your tongue against the front roof of your mouth with teeth and lips both shut. Your eyes should always remain open, and you should breathe gently through your nose. Once you have adjusted your posture, take a deep breath, inhale and exhale, rock your body right and left, and settle into a steady, immobile sitting position. Think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? Non-thinking. This in itself is the essential art of Zazen. The Zazen I speak of is not learning meditation. It is simply the Dharma gate of repose and bliss, the practice realization of totally culminated enlightenment. It is the manifestation of ultimate reality. Traps and snares can never reach it. Once its heart is grasped, you are like the dragon when he gains the water, like the tiger when he enters the mountain. For you must know that just there, in Zazen, the right Dharma is manifesting itself, and that from the first, dullness and distraction are struck aside. When you arise from sitting, move slowly and quietly, calmly and deliberately. Do not rise suddenly or abruptly. In surveying the past, we find that transcendence of both unenlightenment and enlightenment, and dying while either sitting or standing, have all depended entirely on the strength of Zazen. So I just thought that the Fukan Zazengi and that part would be a good start for our discussion on the forms of practice. So we don't all sit in lotus or half lotus, which is one of the first things that may be apparent to all of you. But as I'm sure that you probably remember from your meditation instruction, the one thing we really want in meditation is we want to have a stable base. And usually in Zen practice, we practice with a triangular base. So you want to have 3 points of contact with the ground, which means that if you're sitting on a cushion like this, most likely your knees are touching the floor somehow, or somehow there's 2 points of contact here, and then of course your bottom is usually on a cushion. If you're on a seiza bench, of course you have your bottom supported by the bench, and then your 2 knees are like so. I don't have a seiza bench, but so in seiza you're sitting like this, right? And if you're in a chair, which many of us sit in chairs when our legs just can't take this anymore, because we're not always used to sitting on the floor. When we're sitting in a chair, it's important that your feet are flat on the floor, and that your spine is straight. So your butt, of course, is going to be on the chair, most likely, and your spine is straight. And in all these positions, what we're really trying to do is get a nice erect posture. What I like to say when I'm giving meditation instruction is our point really is to have a posture that is alert. So that's nice and alert. It's not droopy. It's not too relaxed, right? So we're alert, but at the same time we are relaxed. There's not tension in our body. So we want to be able to kind of let the body just be and find a posture that allows that to happen. So whatever posture you're in, just make sure that your spine is straight. If you imagine that thread, your chest should be kind of up and forward. And if you're sitting in a chair, you actually shouldn't be using the back of the chair. You should actually be sitting upright. And if you need help in that, it is okay to put a cushion behind your lower back. And also, like for example, when I sit in a chair, because I'm kind of tall, and these chairs are always made for an average-sized person, or if you're short. So oftentimes I actually put a cushion underneath me when I'm sitting in a chair, and then that will actually allow my thighs to be straight out and my feet to be touching the ground. And I've seen shorter people to use a cushion beneath their feet to help get the right attitude. But if you have your legs kind of at a right angle and your feet flat on the floor, that really helps. And that makes sure that everything's relaxed. And then of course, as Dogen talked about, our traditional hand position is right hand, left hand on top of it, and then we bring the thumbs together like so. And this mudra, and mudra just means sign or symbol, this mudra is traditionally supposed to sit about 2 inches below the navel, but the truth is that we all have, our arms are different lengths, and our bodies have different proportions. We all have different distances, for our upper bodies. So I heard in a talk from somebody at San Francisco Zen Center once that your mudra has a place where it rests comfortably and naturally. And it's just a matter of finding that place. So the prescription is 2 inches below the navel, which probably works for most men. you know, because these instructions were originally given for men. Um, uh, but there's a place where that will rest naturally. Oftentimes, I sit in half lotus and I just rest it on my heel because that's comfortable and it just stays there. And I don't have to focus on it that much. But, and then the arms should be rounded. And your head is just sitting on top of your spine. Your tongue is behind your teeth. And your lips and jaw are just lightly closed. And then you can breathe in and out through your mouth. You don't have to swallow that much. That's one of the benefits of putting the tongue behind the teeth. And the point is just to be, right? So to just let your body rest attentively. And then the other thing is the breath, right? So the breath is really just your natural breath. We're not trying to breathe slow or fast. Ideally, when your breath settles, it should settle into your belly. Traditional meditation instruction is to let your belly flop a little bit forward. I've heard a criticism of that instruction that it fits men's bodies much better than it does women's because of the difference in our pelvis shape to kind of tilt forward like that. But ideally, what you want is you want to give yourself space to breathe, right? And because when your breath settles, it will probably settle into your abdomen. So you want to have space. That's also why you don't wear tight clothing, right? So you loosen your robes, as Dokken said. And then usually we just, in the beginning, really focus on the breath and just to be one with the breath. And the breath, I find, in my Zazen, is a really good anchor. When I lose track of my breathing or when I get lost in thought, the breath is the place I come back to. If you're practicing shikantaza or koan, the breath is kind of a good marker, and it can go with the koan. I use the breath as a tool in koan practice. And in shikantaza, when I get distracted, the breath is the place I come back to, and eventually the breath does release, and you don't need to focus so hard on the breath, but when you're losing track of it, it might mean you're lost in thought. Or for me, oftentimes if I've lost track of my breathing, if I'm not conscious of my breathing to some extent, then, my process of breathing, then I've probably gone into distraction. I really found the piece in the materials that I sent out to everybody by Genpo, sensei at the time, now Roshi, Genpo Merzel, to be really useful in terms of the attitude of the mind in Zazen, because he really talks about how you don't want to, with anything, to be grabbing onto anything. So even if you're holding onto the breath too tightly, that's probably a mistake in your Zazen. Or but also if things are coming up, if emotions are coming up, if sensations are coming up, bodily pain, if you're pushing that away, if you're trying to avoid it, that's also probably a mistake. What you really want, again, is that attitude of body. What I find is that attitude of body of alertness, so you're aware of what's happening. And you're not slack, right? You're not just spacing out. You're there. You're aware, but you're also relaxed. So you're in a position where you can allow things to come in and go out really easily. And just in terms of, for the context of this class, just in terms of Zazen, so that Zazen and that mind, that sort of present and relaxed awareness is really what we're cultivating to some extent, or at least that's what I'm going to say today. It is just a present and relaxed awareness where things um, where we're not pushing things away, we're not pulling things towards us, and we're not going oblivious, right? So we talk about, in Buddhism, we talk about the three poisons, which are greed, I want it, bring it here, anger, or aversion, get that away from me, or ignorance. La 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 la, I don't care, right? In Zazen, we're really trying to practice none of those, right? And of course, they're all going to come up. Your greed, anger, and ignorance are going to come up in your Zazen. And what you do then is you're aware of it, but you let go of it, right? And so the reason I chose to talk about Zazen first, really, is just because Zazen is really the core or the heart of this practice. And I really think that a lot of the forms are wrapped around that. And that mindfulness. I mean, we're practicing in the Zen school, and Zen means meditation. We are the meditation school of Buddhism. And one of the things that I find again and again, I was just reading a piece 2 days ago about Bodhidharma, who's the Chinese founder of Zen, and this piece was emphasizing that he really emphasized looking directly at the nature of mind. So looking directly at the mind, and what is the mind doing, and what is the nature of our mind, and we really cultivate that in seated meditation, and then. So now I'm transitioning to talking about form, but then the form transfers that into other areas of our life surrounding our practice, and then hopefully eventually outside of that. As I was thinking about this, actually, and I'm going to read to you again, I was thinking about one of the texts that really, when I think about form, this text always comes up for me, and this is actually one of the Pali Suttas. This is the Satipatthana Sutta, and I'm not sure which Nikaya it's from. I just have it as
What do all those words mean? Nikaya.
Well, Satipatthana is translated here as the foundations of mindfulness.
Okay.
And sutta is...
Sutra, yes.
Well, yeah, so a sutta is the words spoken by the Buddha. And the Nikayas are the collections of suttas.
Like folios, maybe?
What?
Like folios?
Is like a volume.
Like volume.
Like volumes. Okay,
yeah.
Thank
So I think there's traditionally 4 Nikayas, right? And I'm not sure. I'm just saying that I'm not sure which one this is from.
There's 4 Nikayas in 3 baskets, which is the Tripitaka. So that's the whole thing, the whole volume. I mean, the whole collection.
The whole Pali collection.
Yeah.
So this one is there are different translations of this, but the foundations of mindfulness is the way that this translation does it. And Nathan and I was talking to me the other day that it's important to remember that the Pali word that they're translating as mindfulness also can be translated as remembering, or sort of having focus on something, or sort of having it in front of you. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, it's remembering, or it can also be translated as witnessing.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read a couple pages of this. So this may be long, and we don't have to leave it on the videotape if we don't want to. But it begins, "Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living in the Kuru country, where there was a town of the Kurus named Kamasadama." And this is just setting the scene. There he addressed the bhikkhus and said thus, "Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir," they replied. The Blessed One said this. So an important thing to remember about bhikkhu is that bhikkhu is often translated as monastic, but it also applies to anybody who's practicing the meditative disciplines. Am I wrong there?
No.
No. Okay. So,
There are subtleties,
so,
however.
Yes.
so this was addressed probably to a monastic congregation, but I don't think it applies only to monastics. So he says, bhikkhus, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and grief, and for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of nibbana, namely the four foundations of mindfulness. What are the four? Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating feelings as feelings, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind as mind, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind objects as mind objects, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. So here we actually see the same thread as Dogen Zenji, right? That you put away outside concerns, that you're grasping and clinging to the world, and you pay attention to what's going on here and now.
Ardently. I love that.
Ardently.
That's new for me. I love that. And
So-
you put away grief for the world?
And put away grief for the world, yes.
Busted again.
Is it greed with a D or grief with an F?
Grief with an F.
Oh.
Like sorrow.
Yeah, like sorrow, yeah. So he talks about several things. I'm going to read the part primarily about contemplation of the body, because this is going to tie into to our discussion of form and how we practice with form. And it forms the way I think about form anyway. So he says, and how, bhikkhus, does a bhikkhu abide contemplating the body as a body? Here a bhikkhu, gone to the forest or to the root of a tree or to an empty hut, sits down. Having folded his legs crosswise, set his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him, ever mindfully he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. Breathing in long, he understands, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he understands, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he understands, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he understands, I breathe out short. He trains thus, I shall breathe in experiencing the whole body. He trains thus, I shall breathe out experiencing the whole body. He trains thus, I shall breathe in tranquilizing the body formation. He trains thus, I shall breathe out tranquilizing the bodily formation. Just as a skilled turner or his apprentice, when making a long turn, understands, I make a long turn, or making a short turn understands, I make a short turn. So too, breathing in long, a bhikkhu understands, I breathe in long. He trains thus, I shall breathe out tranquilizing the body formation. In this way...
How do you understand tranquilizing?
Tranquilizing just means calming.
Calming? Okay.
Yeah. So, like I said, relaxed. Attentive but relaxed, right? So in this way, he abides contemplating the body as a body internally, or he abides contemplating the body as a body externally. Or he abides contemplating the body as a body both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in the body its nature of arising, or he abides contemplating in the body its nature of vanishing, or he abides contemplating in the body its nature of both arising and vanishing. Or else mindfulness that there is a body is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and mindfulness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. This is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. And then this is the part that really ties into form, which is the four postures. Again, bhikkhus, when walking, a bhikkhu understands, I am walking. When standing, he understands, I am standing. When sitting, he understands I am sitting. When lying down, he understands I am lying down. Or he understands accordingly however his body is disposed. In this way, he abides contemplating the body as a body, internally, externally, and both internally and externally. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. Again, bhikkhus. A bhikkhu is one who acts in full awareness when going forward and returning, who acts in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away, who acts in full awareness when flexing and extending his limbs, who acts in full awareness when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, who acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food, and tasting, who acts in full awareness when defecating and urinating, who acts in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. In this way, he abides contemplating the body as a body, internally, externally, and both internally and externally. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. It goes on quite a bit, but the sutta also talks about abiding, contemplating the feelings as feelings. So when you're feeling a pleasant feeling, you know you're feeling a pleasant feeling. When you're feeling an unpleasant feeling, you recognize it as an unpleasant feeling. When you're feeling a feeling that is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, you recognize it as neither pleasant or unpleasant. And similarly, you recognize the thoughts as thoughts, right? So contemplating mind as mind. So you recognize your thoughts as your thoughts. So if you're concentrated, you realize you're concentrated. If you're distracted, you realize you're distracted. And the Buddha also said that you look at the objects of mind. So, yes?
Question. So is the point of all this simply just to call it for what it is and not add any ideas or labels or delusions about what you're perceiving or what's going on?
Right. So, thank you for pushing me out of that. I was in a sutra spiral.
Just kind of kept going.
Yeah. So yes, the point of the matter is that you act with awareness and intention,
Okay.
and you feel with awareness and intention, and you think with awareness and intention. Yes.
When I'm writing well, that's a different space than they're talking about here, isn't it? I mean, it's a very. Kozan has happened to interrupt me a couple of times recently when I'm writing, so he's watched me snap out of that state of which feels. I mean, it's a great feeling, and words come out of my fingers, and I'm never quite sure how it all happens. But it doesn't seem like it's quite this, because I'm not aware of it. That's the difference. Does that make sense? Am I making sense, kind of? Or am I looking for something that isn't there?
So, I mean, in terms of Zen practice and mindfulness,
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the reasons that I understand that Maizumi Roshi, I'm told, didn't like the term mindfulness, because in mindfulness there is an observed and an observer, so there's already duality there. So to some extent, Zen, especially because of its Taoist heritage, really has a deep respect for flow. So being in that state of flow, of being so at one with your activity that there is that you are the same. There is no real that's really classically samadhi, right? It's just being, seer and seen are one. Does that make?
I think probably. when you remind me about duality and that, I don't know, but I think it's, I don't know, but I think that's helpful. That's where I'll leave that.
So it could be that you're in flow, and
I'm
then
in
something
flow,
else.
I'm in flow, but I'm not, there, when you talk about, I guess I'm vaguely aware, bless you, that I'm writing. I don't have any thoughts about what I'm doing exactly, except I'm watching the words come out on paper. Does that make, do you understand that?
Yeah. And
It doesn't happen all, I mean, I write, there are other times when I effort at writing, don't misunderstand me.
yeah.
Just where it's like, I have to write one more, but that's a different state.
Remember when when he was here and he said, if you can write a novel without the subject-object distinction, then you're in samadhi.
Without the subject object.
That was my question.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and I had no idea what he was talking
if
about.
when you're painting, if you're just being painting,
Yeah, okay.
when you're
Okay,
walking.
Okay, so that's probably what
just
I'm doing at
being
times.
walking.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
times. And
But
it's a different feeling I have. It's a different thing than when I'm sitting.
when I write, for example, I mean, just for comparison,
Yeah.
something comes out on the page, and my first thought next, like maybe it's a paragraph. My first thought next is, did I do that?
Oh, so I've dropped that kind of stuff.
That's moving out of just being writing
Yeah. And
into
when I,
am I analyzing?
and that's an editing state. And when I get startled, like a couple times in Kozen, usually if I'm by myself, that state, that concentrated state will end, kind of naturally.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And I think that our Zazen is the same. Kokyo Sensei once told me, and this was really useful, that, for me anyway, that in any given period of meditation, you're going to go in and out of samadhi quite a bit. And so there are times when you're just there, and you're really kind of in that flow that there is no subject and object, and then you'll come out of it, and there will be subjects and objects again, and then you might go back into it, and I mean that was just useful to me to understand that that there's kind of ebbs and flows to that state of samadhi.
I just had not thought of what that state in writing as being a samadhi experience. It may be when it happens. It doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah, and I don't know.
I don't know for sure either, and I don't think I need to know for sure. I'm glad just to have expressed it and have some. I'm glad to have expressed it.
Yeah. And so, just to tie this all into form, and the practice of form, is that for me, in many ways, the form that we practice around our meditation is really just a practice in mindfulness, in sort of embodying sort of orderliness and embodying a set of practices to really help us to, or help me to stop and catch myself, or to just be embodying something different. So, I like something that Kozan shared about it being choreography. To some extent, it is all choreography, and I guess I relate to that, because at one point in my life, I was a dancer, and really the way you practice with choreography is you spend a lot of time learning the choreography so that then you can just dance. You know the steps so that to the point where you don't have to think about it. And to some extent, that's the way we practice with form, is that we, when we first start practicing, it's bothersome. And it takes a lot of concentration to remember, what do I do now? What do I do here? What's the correct way to do this? But to some point, it comes to be, just a dance. And then, the other thing too that people talked about the form being a container. One thing that I really appreciate, and part of the way that I really appreciate form these days is, sometimes in my sitting practice, especially because Seisen Roshi really and Echo Sensei both really encourage us to work with the emotions. Sometimes when I'm sitting intensively in sesshin, I'm falling apart. My experience is that my world is just crashing. But when the bell rings, I get up facing forward, I turn around, I adjust my cushion, I bow to my cushion, I wait for the clappers. And I know to do that no matter what's going on inside. And that so part of the form that I've really come to appreciate is I can be falling apart and I can still function because I have a form to follow. And I've really come to appreciate that about the forms that we use. But also, the forms are really just to also, well, I wanted to say that about mindfulness too, is for me, they're also an act of remembering. So, all the forms around entering the zendo, taking my seat, and all of those things are really about remembering where I am, what my intention is here. Just what I'm about here, what I'm about when I'm coming to sit at the zendo. The ritual around the talk, I really use the fact that we chant the Gathan opening the sutra at the beginning as a chance to focus my mind and to remember that I'm listening to the talk not with my critical mind, but with my open Zazen mind. To kind of let it wash over me, and because there's tons of stuff that people say in talks that I could get about, but and I do, and I'm not saying that's completely bad, because sometimes I need to know, I need to be aware. I don't agree with that. That's not. I don't share that opinion, man, as Bernie would say. And that's important information. But at the same time, for me in talks, I like to be open, because there are gems in there that if I get too much into my me, picking at things that I miss. The form is really a container, and I also wanted to say about form is that we are part of the Soto school, and the Soto school really emphasizes moving as one body. That sort of that experience of oneness is something that we as a Sangha manifest when we're together. That together we are orderly, we move together, we all move in the same way, at more or less the same time, doing the same thing. There are other styles of practice, like Nathan was sharing, Vipassana styles of practice are a lot more unstructured than Zen. A lot of our forms are part of our Japanese heritage. The Japanese very much have a culture of there are right ways to do things. There's a right way to do almost everything, and there are rules that you follow, and there is breaking the rules, and there's kind of ignoring the rules sometimes, but there is a way to do everything. And there's a spirit in which you do everything, and it can be a great practice to perfect that, to really try to embody that ideal. But there also, it can also be a real hindrance. There's a great guideline given by Maizumi Roshi, which is to really, in the Zendo around form, we should not be critical of others, but really focus on our own practice and the way that we're practicing with the form. And I've been caught in that trap of, that's one of my traps with practice of form, is that, you're doing it wrong. I know better than you. And that's just building up my ego. To some extent, a lot of the practice of the form is about dropping ego and just dropping myself into the form and letting go of what I want to do and just following the form. And another thing that's been explained to me about the form is kind of like, we're kind of like a snake in a tube, right? The snake um, doesn't realize how it wiggles until it's put in a tube. And then it can't wiggle or it hits something when it wiggles. To some extent, that's another function that the form plays in our Zen practice, is that, I don't feel like bowing now. Well, it's time to bow, just bow. But no, be aware, practice that mindfulness that I didn't feel like bowing there. What's that about for me? Why, what's going on there? What can I learn from that? What does that say about who I am or what's going on or how I've constructed myself? That's just a little bit about how I practice the form. Just sort of as a mindfulness practice and as something I bump up against, something I cling too tightly to, something that, but something that also contains my falling apart and gives me the freedom to fall apart a little bit because I know what's coming next and I know how to act in that situation. So the fact that I really don't have it together is okay. So I'm running out of talking steam and I think it's time to stop anyway. So I'm going to stop now and kind of open it up, or we could take a break or whatever.
I have a couple of questions.
Uh-huh.
Do you have a mnemonic or something? Because I'm always doing this the wrong way. I'm always getting my left hand under my right hand. So do you have some mental trick?
I don't necessarily, and the truth is that historically that's reversed. I read somewhere that at one point it was actually left on top of right, or sorry, right on top of left, and it's since
So I
reversed.
should just quit worrying about it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's easy.
Okay,
And-
now I'm mixed up. Which is it?
Yeah.
It's like this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
So one
right on.
person
But
did
if you-
teach me that the right hand represents enlightenment, the left hand represents
Something else.
so like oneness and diversity, and you're bringing them together, and the oneness is supporting the diversity. But
That sounds like somebody trying to figure it out. like
yeah,
me.
someone
Made up a
trying to figure
rule.
it out. Like,
The other thing, when I exit the zendo,
uh-huh.
am I supposed to bow on exiting?
So Nathan and I were just talking about this morning. In a lot of places they do bow on exiting the zendo. Here we don't, and I think, and he was asking me why, and the truth is I don't really know, but I think it's a leftover from when we used to, the Buddha Hall used to be our zendo. And as anybody who's been in that room knows, that doorway is very narrow, and when there were, probably 10 to 15 of us, if we all stopped and turned around and bowed as we left, it would have taken us 15 minutes to get out of there. So I think Roshi just said, stop bow when you leave the zendo. And we just sort of continued that as we...
That's one of the things I love about this whole thing of bringing the form ties us to history, it gives us a container. And when it doesn't work, we do something else. I just really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. So until Roshi says I should bow leaving the zendo, I will just exit.
Yeah.
Mindfully.
And there's a practice that I kind of like that I haven't experienced this firsthand, but that I'm told that at the Berkeley Zendo that they bow out as they leave because they're bowing to the world as they enter it to take that mind
That actually makes a great deal of sense.
the mindfulness that they've cultivated in the Zendo out into the world. I kind of like that.
I can give the world a nod on my way out, in other words.
Yeah, give the world a nod as you enter it, but I think traditionally you bow, it's just the same as bowing to your cushion, which is an acknowledgement of just sort of a thank you to the space for being a space for you to practice.
Well, and Roshi also said sometime I heard her say, it's also acknowledging myself for being willing to do this.
Yeah, I like
that kind of tickled me. Oh, good. I get credit.
Can I ask a question about bowing? Actually, you answered the first part of my question just now, which was, what are we bowing to? So thank you, I got that in. But when it comes to the Dharma talk and the 3 vows, which are more extensive than just the simple vow, what's that about? What's the story behind the difference there?
Well, so I could just tell you what I know, which again could just be stories people have made up to figure it out. But one thing that is really emphasized is that you're not bowing to anything external. So a lot of people say you're bowing to your true nature, or you're bowing to the Buddha, to the Buddha within, to the enlightenment within. Some other interpretations for bowing. I mean, there's a whole thing Maizumi Roshi says about bowing in the texts that I sent out. But bowing is also, I've heard, felling the mast of ego. So, cutting down the mast of ego. So making yourself low intentionally, so that you, kind of showing yourself that any position that you occupy is not your true position. But when we do bow, and another way to look at it too is that in the Jukai ceremony, and actually in a lot of Zen ceremonies, they end with a practice called Buddha bows to Buddha. So, like the end of the Jukai, one of the ends of the Jukai ceremony classically is that the teacher bows to the students and the students bow to the teacher simultaneously. And what that is that they're recognizing the Buddha in each other, right? So at the end of the talk, I kind of like to see it that way, that we're all, the teacher bows to the Sangha and the Sangha bows to the teacher. Recognizing the Buddha in each other. To some extent too, you just bow to bow. Nathan looks like he wants to say something.
No. I was just going to add, I also learned that you're bowing to the 3 treasures.
Yeah.
Simultaneously.
So you are also
Oh, that's why it's done 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of Zen stuff is done in 3s. It's either done in 1s or 3s or 9s. We tend to do things not much above 3, but things are often done in 9s also. At San Francisco Zen Center, I'm told, I've heard that the legend is that somebody complained once about having to bow 3 times. So Suzuki Roshi said, "You're right. Let's bow 9 times." So still to this day, they bow 9 times.
Well, and how many bows are they doing? What's the ceremony when we're doing the precepts? What do you call it? Ceremony?
The Pusatsu?
Yeah, you guys. That's a workout. I don't bow. I don't go clear down.
Yeah.
But I was watching you guys this last. I didn't count the number of bows. But there are a bunch through that whole evening, just like with any of the ceremonies, apparently.
Yeah, but probably classically you're bowing to each of the 3 treasures, both individually and simultaneously when you do the 3 vows. So Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And in the way that we bow, we go down to the floor and then we put our hands above our ears. And I'm told that this symbolizes lifting the Buddha above your head. So you're putting something above yourself. You can call it Buddha, you can call it anything, but putting something above your sense of self. Or lifting up that which is most valuable to you. Okay. So I don't think we're really picky about what it is we're bowing to. And it's just
That's the case where the actual form of the bow is giving something to you. It's not the interpretation of what the bow is, but just being in the form of it.
Yeah. And that's classic instruction, when you're bowing, just be bowing. Just be bowing. It doesn't, there's no to anything or, you know, um, and one thing about form that is, in terms of little points too though, is that when you do bow and you lift up, ideally you're supposed to do flat palms directly up and down so that you're not throwing the Buddha. Right, so it's not a Buddha toss, right? You're lifting straight up and then putting them straight down.
And then then it was the right hand over the fist.
Yeah, so shashu is basically just this position, and then you just take the left and wrap the thumb around it, and then wrap the other hand.
And is there any particular symbology around this? Probably. Do we know it?
Not really. One thing Roshi has told me is that an acupuncturist told her that there are, somehow this is making a circuit connection between many of the meridians, the acupuncture meridians or channels. So it's kind of just completing a circuit.
But then
Then this kind of, I guess, is the same thing. It's just, and this is supposed to be held at the sternum, at the bottom of the sternum, or where you can. I think this is just, a lot of the reason that we hold this position in a lot of things is just that it's tight and it's sort of self-contained. So it's kind of just keeping our energy together and contained instead of letting it be dispersed, right? So again, that sort of relaxed attentiveness, right? And I practice actually with keeping a little bit of tension in the arms, but you don't have to. That's just one thing I do to kind of make myself aware of it. It's just to feel a little bit of pressure there when I'm doing kinhin, I do anyway. And feeling this frame. Again, I think that comes from being a dancer and really being aware of frame when I'm doing partner dancing. But that's just me. So I don't think that's traditional Zen teaching.
Walking around the grounds in that position at certain times.
So during sesshin, it is suggested that you walk around like this. And, I guess Zazen and I are the only ones that really do this, but for those that wear a koromo also, the priest robe, so the really impossibly long sleeves, the one thing that those do is it's a real practice because you basically can't let your wrist be lower than your elbow or your sleeves are going to fall. So part of walking like this, I think, also is just to make sure that your sleeves don't fall. And, oftentimes we have a zagu hanging off of one arm too, and that just keeps it from falling down as well. So to some extent that in a monastic practice where you're wearing those bizarre formal robes, it's just practical to some extent, but this is also just keeping everything together. And so this is, in sesshin you're supposed to walk around like this, and ideally you're supposed to walk around with your eyes down, not to the extent that you would run into a tree or something, but just you're not supposed to be up and walking around. But then just a sesshin or two ago, Roshi said that she thinks it's really important to take a little time to just, when you're in sesshin, to sit in the garden and just take in the world. So, but I think traditionally that was, don't let your attention dissipate. And so you do that both with your body and with your mind. And to some extent that's what the form is also, is just manifesting with your body the mental state that you're trying to cultivate. Or experience, or if you don't like to cultivate language. But yeah, did anybody have any questions about particular forms? I actually wrote the thing in the book, but if there's anything, the whole Sweetwater form
Is in there? Okay.
is in there. It's like the first or second document. It used to be in this book was the ZCLA form. That's one of the changes that we made.
Where do we keep, do we have a library of these things?
We have our library, but this, you know, on the members page, there are some documents that if you go to the
Website.
files section, there are some of these things that I think have been posted to the members page. On the Yahoo groups, yeah, on Yahoo
Oh,
groups.
Yahoo group, okay.
Yeah, on the Yahoo groups on the files section.
I've never looked there.
And then, but you know, usually through the materials of this class, and like this time, I just decided that because it's always been a big cost, and we never know how many to print up beforehand.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mind printing up my own. That's, I just
And
didn't know what it is.
so I figured, since a lot of people have e-readers now and stuff, or can read them on the computer and avoid the cost of printing, save a tree or two, or you know, there's nothing wrong with printing it out either. So I think that was longer than I expected it to be. But we've been sitting for about an hour. Probably be good to move up and use bathrooms if we need to or anything. And then we can come back and do council, or we could end here. I was thinking to do council, but if people really have important pool parties to get to and stuff.
Council in 25 minutes.
Yeah, I don't want to go past noon.
Yeah, I don't want to go past noon either.
And I would appreciate the extra time if we ended now, just to be really blunt.
Well, why don't we just go around once and do any additional, just kind of do a checkout, or yeah, and just if anybody has any points of curiosity or something, you know, I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions, and I'm here a lot. If you have questions about form, I tend to know a lot. I don't know why I tend to gravitate towards this, but if you have questions about what you should be doing when, I could probably tell you, or I'll tell you that I don't know, or what my best guess is. Yes?
Well, my thing is, there's sometimes when I can't sit that long, and I really need, like, to get up. And I'm not sure when to do it, and sometimes I'll sit and you know, something's pain shooting on my leg or something that is, I'm very uncomfortable, and I'll just wait until it's over. So if I need to like get up and maybe stay or sit out the rest of that Zazen, I can,